Welcome to the Serverless Show, episode number 1. We've got the entire Serverless Guru, leadership team here. Why don't we do a round of intros since this is the first episode? Jonathan, why don't you kick us off?
Hi, I'm Jonathan DeGroot. I'm the head of marketing at Serverless Guru, and I'm happy to be here. And I got my dog in my lap, so if I seem distracted at all, it's probably her trying to escape.
Awesome. All right, Alex.
Hey, I'm Alex. I'm head of engineering here. First episode as well. We'd love to see how this turns out.
Awesome. Mr. Josh.
For sure, I am Josh Proto, COO here at Serverless Guru. If it is, if everything is running smoothly and everyone wonders what I'm doing, that's because I'm doing my job okay. And I'm just here getting down my green smoothie. So I am super happy to be here with all y'all, because y'all are some of my favorite people.
Awesome. And dramatic hand gesture. I'm the founder of Serverless Guru, Ryan Jones. Nice to see everyone. And this is the first episode of the Serverless Show. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about stuff, and we're going to riff back and forth, and then we'll stop it, upload it to YouTube. And ideally, we get feedback from the community, we improve it, and then we'll just try to do this on a recurring basis. So thanks for showing up for the first episode, the 3 of the people that are probably watching this on YouTube.
Thanks, Mom.
And so let's just jump straight into the first overarching question, which is, let's see, what does serverless mean to you, Alex?
Serverless is a relieving technology that's really transforming the industry today. It's a very small market that's being touched in the industry now, and our goal is to really just prove and be the leader in the industry, and that serverless does work in a lot of use cases. And it's amazing to kind of see these enterprise companies kind of taking these challenges and making this happen. And yeah, I mean, serverless to me is the next evolution of software industry. And yeah, I mean, I think the automation part is really the future of software development, and that's what serverless is all about.
Awesome. And kind of on a different spectrum of it, I think all of us have kind of unique angles that we look at this from. In terms of, being kind of the marketing guru for Serverless Guru, Jonathan, when you're in the interwebs looking at all the things popping up through social media and all that stuff, what does that look like? What are the things that you pay attention to, and what do you see coming through the community, and what type of insight do you got for us?
Yeah, so as Ryan stated really nicely, I'm pretty tech adjacent. I didn't come into the company as anyone with a lot of coding or development experience, and so serverless to me for a while was something I needed to learn a lot about. And I think that was my answer. I was like, serverless is confusing, and I need to learn a lot about, but it's not confusing, in that you know what I mean. It's a really cool niche part of like cloud computing, and I think being within like the Twitter sphere of it, being like integrated into the community before I was really integrated into the technology side, it's really interesting watching the human dynamics behind the technology, because I think there's a lot of that going on too, because you have like a lot of big players in the space. You have people like the Nader Dabbits, and you got your Corey Quinns, who like have sassy takes on things, and people like that. Something you see a lot on every profile is like opinions are my own. I think that is because serverless is really tied to AWS, which is Amazon, and people don't necessarily want to like say like, oh, I reflect an entire business that I'm just using their service for. So I think that's a big part of it, and I think that was like an interesting aspect of serverless was like opinions are my own. Like don't think just because I'm tied to this company, or I use this technology, that I'm tied to their opinions. And I think that's something that I really appreciate about developers. It's like they're like, well, if I have an opinion on something, I'm gonna let you know about it, and if it's controversial, like better for it. And I think that's something I've noticed in the space a lot. Are people have really strong opinions and have like technologies they like, they like to use, and they have opinions on that. And it's really interesting seeing what services are kind of hot in the moment, what isn't. And something I think I've noticed a lot, especially with marketing, is that you can find a lot of things for people who are beginners in serverless, which is helpful for me in like learning crash course stuff. Or you can find something for someone who's like an AWS hero, like who's someone who's really deeply involved in it. And you don't find a lot for the people who are kind of the middle ground of that. So I think like, that's kind of a niche area within this niche area that people don't focus on as much, is how to go from like being like a mid-level developer to like high level. And I think, you know, that's an interesting space in the marketing sphere, but I can touch on that a little bit more later. I don't want to go too
Yeah.
long.
Yeah, so this is a good segue to the first kind of round robin question. We can kick it off with Josh.
Sure.
What are some key ingredients to developers that you've seen in the space that have really marketed themselves well? Like, what are those key components that they have? Is it certain marketing aspects of themselves? Is it giving talks? Like, what do you think?
This is huge, and I think it's an important question. And I was talking with a colleague of mine who was involved in just interviewing a lot of candidates for their really like their enterprise. They have like they're working at an enterprise blockchain company, and they're an engineer, and they're hiring other engineers. And I think this question also dovetails into those whose responsibilities are like finding, procuring, supporting talent as well, and like because there's like two sides to that equation of like like as an organization, we have like jobs that need to be done, but as like the one who is highly skilled as an engineer, like you have the skills, and it's like, well, how can I communicate those skills effectively? And I think, ultimately, I think what is it like being able to demonstrate and show you have a high level understanding of like your work and the tools and technologies you use and how that's beneficial. Like that really makes one person stand out above the rest. So if you're able to say that, I worked on this project, this application, and had this architecture, this is why I helped choose it or steer the project in this direction. These it was as perfect as it could be, and these were the challenges that happened, and this is how we troubleshooted them. Like if you can say that sort of story and just demonstrate that story and that pattern of communication, like I think I've seen those individuals be able to, like, that is one aspect that's made individuals stand out. Also, I think with the serverless community is just like a huge enthusiasm for the technology, and be able to say that like, hey, I figured out how to do this, or I see this potential use case with this technology. I want to build it, or let's build it, or I am building it. And there's a lot of support, because I think being a developer and an engineer, it's like a creative discipline. It's like at a certain level, it's like being a sculptor. I think, or I'm a musician, so I see so much relationship to like my music that I do. I can relate to it that way. Like there's so many different ways to go from point A to point B, but it's left to the individual to sort of craft that solution. It's like a dance. It's like a performance with technology, which is really, really fun thing for me to say. So I think people who are able to like dance on that line, like serverless or engineering as art and science mixed together, I think that really pulls on a strong like cultural human to human experience that leads to like better job prospects overall.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. Let's hear from Alex on this. So from your perspective, being kind of in the engineering aspects and the day to day of seeing how people thrive, and what type of things really stand out to you on the recruiting side as well. What would you say?
Well, let's see. I think, like, as us engineers, we love to solve problems, and any challenge that because day-to-day job is about solving challenges, and I think a lot of gratification comes from that. So what I see in the most commonly, like, common traits that I see in successful engineers is that they have a lot of different hobbies that they're dedicated, a lot of different passion, whether that's they're a musician or they're incredible cook at something. That there's some sort of tie in a way that they like to seek those different challenges and kind of be fulfilled in different areas. And when I see those traits, I notice the same kind of discipline in the engineering side as well, where these guys are highly collaborative and kind of in a problem solving state and just trying to get, things done rather than just, oh, this is my work. I have to just pick up a ticket and get out at 5 p.m. It's more like, oh, I enjoy tackling onto this problem, and being kind of creating that type of culture, I think, is what engineers enjoy the most, just being in a collaborative state and just having different more hobbies and passion, I think, is a good indicator, generally good indicator of being a successful engineer.
Yeah, and so I think that that's perfect. Now, getting to kind of the more of the marketing side of things, Jonathan, when you're looking at stuff and you're seeing developers really show up in like the feeds and all these things that are like constantly rising to the top of people's list. You mentioned Nader Dabit. There's other people out there. Corey Quinn was another good example. What type of ways are you seeing that these people that are standing out are engaging with the community, or is it content that they're making? What are you seeing?
Mm-hmm. I think it's a mix of both. I think, people who are really dedicated to their craft just tend to have a lot of outlets for it. I think Josh and Alex touched on that too, with different hobbies and skills they have. Like a lot of the times, people who are really popular in a space will have a really popular blog or like a newsletter, or just be someone who's been in the space for a while. I think the collaborations are a really big part of it too. A lot of the people are really big into open source and stuff like that. I know that's a really important part of the community, is like open source work and things like that. What I see really works to engage with the community, though, is usually like they'll either pose a question, like, what are you guys' thoughts on this new thing that came out? And then they'll really candidly give their opinion, or they give a candid opinion, and people will interact with them, being like, why would you say that? Or like, oh, I totally agree, I'm 100% with you. And people will have the discourse. It's never really like an argument in the comments. It's a discourse. I think it's a perfect word for it. It's like a moderated or unmoderated talk about the technology. And it's I think it's the people who can be most authentic to themselves. And I think that's why the whole like opinions are my own is a really important part of it, because it's open source, right? It's like community based and community focused and collaboration, but it's also like my opinions are my own. I will help you. I will give you them. I will be candid with you. And I think people really appreciate the authenticity in a lot of people who are like the really highly marketable devs, or the people who I see rise to the top, or always kind of true to themselves. I think something that made me laugh the other day, I read this it was this tweet by Nader Dabit, who was like, yeah, guys, today I tweeted a fleet of what I ate. I made like some kind of post about a meme crypto stock, and I posted a shirtless picture, and I only lost like 20 followers. Love you all who stayed, or something like that. And that got a bunch of reactions, and people were like, I missed the shirtless pic, post it again. And I think it's when they can take a step back and be like, I'm a human behind the computer too, and not just like I have to market myself as like I'm a developer, right? Like I'm an artist, I'm a musician, I take shirtless selfies, and you can see them sometimes. I think those are the key aspects that I think the human side comes through with how they present their dev side a lot too.
Yes, this is a really interesting thing that you brought up, which is authenticity. So I guess like to frame it towards Josh first, what role do you think that authenticity plays when you've seen successful developers, consultants, all that stuff come through Serverless Guru and just wider into the market? How do you see that in 2021?
Oh, totally. So for me, I'm just like a huge believer that like all business is like human to human. Like all business is like, I have this problem, I have these obligations, and like it gets to a certain point where like you're doing so much and your roles are so sort of essential that like you need assistance. Like one person can't do it all. And it's sort of like you need a team of trusted people in order to do that. And I think, we fulfill that role at Serverless Guru for many organizations by mastering serverless, doing our best to master best practices and beyond when it comes to professionalism and like organizational management. And I think like really like understanding like this realm of like how to be authentic and like how to be authentic and transparent and professional, I think falls into like the buzzword of like operational excellence. Like what does it mean to be operationally excellent? Well, it means having like a team of individuals and trusted advisors that you trust, work well together, and that can at the end of the day get things done and move the needle forward. Like that's what it all boils down to like all work across all industries. And in my mind, that's an operator. And how to unpack that sausage, that sandwich. Like there's a lot of details. There's a lot of secret sauce and recipes that go into that, and depending, there's plenty of like, fancy names of researchers of processes to do all that with. So you get to pick which one you want to do and implement. But at a high level, like I think it all does boil down to like, being able to authentically be yourself and demonstrate your skills in a way that like, what is it like and uplifts the rest of your team members. It is very, very essential. And I think like top tier like developers, consultants, and just like members of any company or organization, they have some level of that understanding, and they're okay of like being themselves in their work environment. And being able to talk about like, yeah, I sing, or like, yeah, I play soccer or something like that. Like they can feel comfortable. They don't have to force themselves into like a mold of how to be.
Yeah. So to kind of direct this towards you now, Alex, when it comes to client work, team cohesion, different aspects like this, what do you see as like authenticity type of play into all those different aspects?
Yeah, I think authenticity is important because, like I said earlier, with the high collaboration, I think is kind of the key ingredient here, right? Oftentimes that, like developers kind of get into a space where, they're treated as like a code monkey, right? You're being told what to do in like a Jira task. You don't really have a full picture of the product or the vision in itself. And I think just kind of having that kind of space is really important, because the engineers are the ones building the product, and they need to be able to see the entire vision of where the business and the product are deciding. So just again, high collaboration, I think, is the big thing. Just being part of the whole ecosystem and just being more collaborative is a key ingredient here.
Yeah, and we have something very interesting at Serverless Guru, which is we have a channel that I believe you kicked off, Alex, which is around I think it's virtual coffee shop or something. When it comes to that, what role do you believe that plays in kind of maybe bringing your whole self to work, or on that authentic same line of thinking?
Right. And I think the challenge nowadays is the whole remote workspace that we've been in here. Is like we sit behind the computer, and the closest collaboration we ever do is to sit on a Zoom meeting face to face. But it's always around like the day-to-day work. You're not really We're not in an office anymore where you get to kind of swing by, your coworkers, desk and say, "Hey, what are you doing? And how's your weekend? How's your wife doing?" Like, we don't really have that kind of environment anymore. So that's kind of the biggest challenge in kind of this time around, where how do we kind of create that environment, right? And the smallest step that I could think of is kind of talking about something else. And I think Virtual Coffee Shop does an amazing job with that, which is basically randomly asking a topic of questions. What is your favorite pet, or what is your favorite food? And everyone kind of gets to jump in and reply on the thread and kind of show their personality a little bit, which can kind of go into a longer conversation about, oh, hey, I've cooked that before. How do you do it? I do it this way. That's something that's kind of like off the day to day. And so, yeah, I think that's a small step in terms of just kind of getting everyone together. And I think my goal is always trying to make sure that everyone feels like we're in one space, and everyone gets to say, knock on your neighbor's door and say, "Hey, how you doing?" And that's, again, like a challenge right now that we have to face in a remote environment.
Yeah, and I'd love to get your idea on this as well, Jonathan. Like, I know that it looks like you're out in the middle of nowhere at the moment, so for potentially all of us are in cities or something. It looks like so I'm not sure there's humans around and all those different aspects. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So how do you view this? How has the remote transition been, and what ways have you like learned to cope with it? And yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I live out here in the middle of the woods, and I feel like if I see a car come by, I'm like, oh, well, what could they be going? I'm like, who's up here with me? Why people? But I came from like a lot of like service industry jobs, or like I was in school for a while to be like a therapist, so like I'm really used to like the really human element of like interacting with like people one on one. And I remember describing a situation to Josh a little bit where when we first started doing like Zoom meetings, or like when everything shut down and this became the new kind of normal way of interacting with people, it would be really hard for me to like really stay focused on the computer, like feel like I'm talking to people. I use my hands a lot in communication. That's not something you really do in Zoom, because like a lot of the times your hands are like off screen. So it was a really big adjustment period. So I think you know having spaces within the company that are dedicated just to preserving that kind of sense of normalcy, where you're like you can talk about something. Like the only reason I'm messaging Alex today is so I can ask about something that has to do with the DevOps side of things, or like instead of like how I would probably do it in real life and come up and ask like, "Hey, how's your day been? I see how you got a new haircut. That's cool. Let's talk for a minute, and then I'll ask you about business." It's like you can't really. It's kind of awkward to do that on Slack, just out of the blue, like just DM someone like, "Hey, got a new haircut? That's cool." like you know, but like I think we do a good job of balancing that out here at the company. I think we've done a lot of like, we've had a lot of ideas on how to better improve the kind of impact of not being around people, not being around offices. It can feel kind of lonely being on a computer all day. And I think that's why people on Twitter really tend to gravitate to the people who are really like human on it, because they can like, if I'm sitting and I'm coding all day, at least I can feel like I'm hanging out with this guy on Twitter a little bit. I'll interact with him and have a conversation that's not just work. I think that's a really important part of it.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, Alex, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, and segue question to you, Ryan, right? As somebody who's been meeting these business executives left and right in real person, traveling to Canada and doing all these sorts, how has that impacted you as a leader in the industry? How has your communication changed, collaboration, any of the client meetings? What are some of the challenges that you face?
Yeah, totally. So that was a weird transition. The Serverless Guru is growing. We got our biggest contract thing. I talked about it with Josh on the podcast that'll come out soon on the Talking Serverless podcast. We got this moment. We got our first enterprise client. It was like a Super Bowl moment for us. Traveled to Toronto, Canada. Was there in person. Something was happening at the client. Had to fly back again. And I finally got that experience of like, oh, this is what it looks like. Because like my dad travels all the time for work, and I've always thought that was cool. So I traveled to a different country for work, and I gave a training on serverless, and I was so hyped about it. And things were paid for, and the hotel was paid for, and my food was comped, and it was awesome. And so I then thought, oh, this is my future. And then I came back through the airports, traveling back to Canada, back to the US. And I started seeing people wearing masks, and the coronavirus thing started like popping up in different places. And it was like weird because like I felt like anxiety being in the airport when this was happening, because they started to show like things on the screen and like nobody knew what was going on, right? Is this like a real thing? How bad is this? Like no one fully knew at that point. And so, yeah, that was a big thing, is that being in person, being in an office, and I would just have developers from the client basically come into this like little office I was set up in, and they just asked me questions in person, and I went out with them and had like dinner and stuff, and we went to like a food court, and we were just chatting about all sorts of things, and it was, you could really tell the connection was seamless, right? Like it was great. And then transitioning to this new world that we kind of woke up into, uh, it's been a lot harder, because it's harder to create those connections over something like a Zoom call. And sometimes it's very easy to forget that at the end of the day we are all humans. It's the same thing that Josh was saying earlier. It's a human to human interaction. And so I think now the kind of ways that we've tried to incorporate that is like shared Slack channels with clients, trying to open up the communication flows about like all the things that are taking place, as well as doing things like meeting with clients and kind of just like picking their brain about how things are going, even outside of that. And sometimes that's hard to do. But at the end of the day, it's like you kind of just, everybody wants to kind of express that side too, but now we don't really have as many ability to do it. The same thing that Jonathan was saying. It's like you used to go up and be like, hey, nice haircut. Also, let's get into this thing for a little bit, and then we'll talk about work. And now everything's very pointed and direct, and yeah. So I guess I'll transition off that question. Hopefully, answered that enough. There was a thing that popped in my head when you said that, Alex, which is we did get an office in early 2020 in Portland, Oregon, for Serverless Guru, and shortly after that we closed it. And I guess like Josh, you were there when this was happening. How did it feel to both have an office and then see the office go away within like only a couple of months?
Gosh, that's a that's a great question. I remember when we got it, it was like such like almost kind of like a rite of passage in a certain way, because like it's just sort of like like real companies have offices, and they can people come in, and then there's lunch, and then there's like you know there's like a dynamic, and it's like, wow, serverless Guru, we're really making it in the world, which is like it's such like, I think, a false dichotomy to think like you need an office in order to make it. Like I was just listening to to like a This Week in Startup podcast, and Jason Calcanis had like the CEO of Redfin on, and he says that like now all the business executives, what they do, like all the CEOs, they like get together and they make fun of like how long their lease terms are. And they're like, oh wait, you have 20 years left on your lease? And it's like, haha, I have like 2 years left on my lease. And that, it's sort of like, you're at the whim of the times and the conditions, because at one point, like, it may be like, wow, I got like a 30-year lease, I'm so excited and happy, and to be like, wow, we're paying overhead for an office, like we're really making it. Now it's like if we still had that office, it would be like a sign of things not as optimized, and we're actually like as an organization, I think, more efficient, and us deciding to go like 100% remote really have really put us ahead many other industries and companies who sometimes I'm reading on LinkedIn now are still being like, oh, I guess we won't go back to the office, or I guess we really need to figure out how to work remote. We sort of got like a several month head start, and we're able to work with individuals who have been working remote for a while, and so they just sort of get it. Like, we're not really having to retrain ourselves on how to do it. But I think like it definitely was a shock. But in the moment, like, I wasn't really sad. I was like, thank gosh we can break this lease, because who knows what the future is going to be. And let's protect our downside risk. I think that's like my broken record statement that I always say. It's like, well, what's the downside risk? And like, getting rid of the office was a very good thing. I spent a lot of time putting together that furniture, but the chairs would slide around anyway, and so I'm glad that I didn't buy myself a new office chair, because we're no longer there.
Yeah, and then kind of on this topic too, which is remote work now. I guess, do y'all ever want to go back to the office, or is it? I've heard I know I have my opinion on this, which is probably probably not. It's like we got that rite of passage where it's like you see the plaque and it says Serverless Guru on it, and it did kind of feel like, oh, it's now a thing, right? We have a physical location where we come to exist, But yes, I guess like, what are y'all's thoughts? We start with Jonathan, like, going back to an office or working remote still, and what things does either one of those options afford you?
Yeah, it's funny we talk about the office, because I remember right when I was getting hired, Josh was talking about the office a lot, and he was like, "Yeah, move up here, come to Portland," because I was based out of like the San Francisco Bay Area. And he's like, "Come on up, you got an office now. You can live in Portland and like commute like really short to the office, and it's a really cool location, And I was like, "Oh, that's really sick. I'm really excited to come up and be a part of this organization and be in this office." And like, I think I moved up literally like the Sunday, and the next day everything was announced that it had just been locked down, right? It was like, I think it was like the day before everything was officially locked down in Oregon. And I think within like the next couple weeks, Josh was like, "Yeah, no, that lease is broken. We don't have that office anymore." Like, it's everything is now remote now, which was really nice because I was moving at the time. So like being able to stay home and unpack and like be there was really nice. But at the same time, it was kind of like well, I just moved here. I don't, I guess if it was going to be remote anyway, I didn't necessarily need to move up here to be in the office. So it was definitely a shock, a little bit. But I think that was more of the shock of the whole world shutting down. But now that we've been in it, I don't know how many tally marks I have on my wall, but now we're like a year and a half, a year and like, gosh, yeah, like a year and 7 months into it. I don't know if I'd go back to an office necessarily. I don't think I had an office to go back to, so I was kind of born into it. I think, like, what's the Bane quote, right? Like, you know, you exist in the dark, but I was born in it. Like, like you guys do remote work, but I was born in the remote work. And I think it affords me a lot more time to kind of work on my own schedule, especially as a contractor. Like, I can like have a really late night and do something at 4 in the morning, and someone across the world who we work with in India can collaborate with me on it. And it's like, I didn't need to be in a physical office to have that interaction, and that's really cool. And like the power of remote work, and I guess the comfort of being remote for longer and being more comfortable with Zoom meetings and calls is just a skill you also have to like, I guess I didn't see it as a skill at first, and so I think I really struggled with it. And I was like, well, I'm just bad at Zoom calls, but it's like a skill you have to kind of work on, getting comfortable talking on video. And so I think as I flex that muscle a bit more, I think the idea of going back to an office feels a little less appealing, just because being home is so nice. Not saying I wouldn't want to see all your lovely faces, lovely faces in person, because that would definitely be a plus. I would love to be able to just go out for drinks or something, right? Like a hard day finally done, let's go out to get drinks. Is a lot different than like, hey, let's all bring our own beer to a Zoom call and drink at my computer screen. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the idea of meeting up to get drinks and things like that, and then have that connection still, but then still run your life. Yeah, that makes total sense. Switching to you, Alex, you transitioned into Serverless Guru after we had already closed down the office, and you came from Nike enterprise environment. They've got an amazing world headquarter office, and you were there for quite a bit. What does that transition kind of look like? And also, same question that I posed to Jonathan, which is, going back to an office, staying remote, and what things does either one of those options afford you?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Nike was definitely, there's a lot of fun stuff there and definitely fun gadgets that you could, and but after a while, like that stuff just kind of gets old too, and you just kind of, it's just there now. Like you go to the world headquarters and it just feels like another office. Um, for me, I definitely do miss certain elements of human interaction that cannot happen remotely as of now. There's nothing, there's no feeling like going into a war room with your engineers and solving a critical problem after hours and just feeling that gratification as a team and a whole, or just taking a smoke break or a lunch break and having these off talks about something. And that's when like great magic kind of tends to happen, right? When you're not so focused and heavily into the weeds and you're just able to just relax and talk to your colleagues about something else, right? And it's hard to replace that, like I said earlier, in this kind of remote space. But at the same time, the benefits of being this new remote environment, I think, is bringing a lot of different values as well. And one of them being, which, if you manage offshore and U.S. time zone team well, then in this software industry is one of those really niche industries where you don't really have to physically do something, right? You just need a laptop and a Wi-Fi, and you can contribute anywhere from the world, any time in the day, right? And so what I've seen now is that Serverless Guru really does operate 24/7, and there's not a moment where the project is not running. Where in your regular offices, 9 to 5, that's your time, and from that point, like nothing's being developed, nothing's being monitored. So you have to have separate teams and people to even pay extra to cover those hours. Whereas our one of the most biggest client is 24/7, right? And we don't need to have extra people to cover when somebody's sleeping at 3 in the morning because they have to fix a minor or major bug. So to me, that's power, because that's literally 2 times the value you're outputting as a company. And I feel like there are a lot of other elements that has a lot of big benefits in terms of being a remote. And I think the finding the medium balance, I think, is the biggest thing. How can we keep the human elements and keep the same emotion? Because we're all humans and we love the emotions, right? And how do we keep that element at the same time, take advantage of these pros that we get from remote environment? I think that to me is like the sweet spot of the next kind of norm of the industry and the workforce, at least in the software industry.
Yeah, and to kind of throw my own thing in here, I'm like, I've slowly been like moving towards like almost where you're at, Jonathan, where you're just like out in nature. And so like I'm now in Puerto Rico, so that the whole remote, all these things, actually not traveling to clients and not having an office allowed me to kind of move around. And now I'm really playing around with the idea of getting land, building like a small little house, having a satellite run off like a generator. Like I'm now getting like or solar panels and a generator, and water backups and all that stuff, right? Yeah, so like that's something that's very interesting about what we specifically do, where everything is remote. And another thing that I want to touch on too there is like we have a global team, and exactly what Alex was saying is that we have 24/7 coverage just by circumstance, right? Not because we're forcing people in the US to be up in the middle of the night, but we have people spread all across the world. And and maybe you can jump in here, Josh. I mean, we're in how many countries now?
Oh, we're at least like at least 7. I need to update what our list is, but like 20 plus engineers in 7 plus countries from around the world, and like nearly not like not every time zone because there's too many, but in a wide variety of time zones to where at what Alex said is a billion percent true. Like during any moment of the day, there's probably someone's availability is overlapping, and they're making the world more serverless. They are fulfilling client obligations and growing themselves, which is like a fascinating thing for me to think about.
Yeah, and so kind of switching topic here, randomly, outside of work, what type of things, I guess, do y'all do that kind of keeps, are there any things around specifically, like programming or specifically the industries that we work in, has doing this type of work opened up new things that y'all got interested in as a byproduct? Or yeah, what are your thoughts, directed towards Josh first?
Sure. I think what is it? Being in a position now, the leadership team at Serverless Guru, where I'm helping not just like run the essential functions, but plan for the future of the entire business and all of our engineers and other people's businesses. Like it's given me a very beneficial perspective, I think, to just like advise friends and colleagues around like ideas around like starting a business or organizing a business, or like wanting to like buy a house, or just like really like planning for the future. Because a lot of like what my job is, I think, is like risk mitigation, risk understanding, as well as like understanding like project priorities and objectives, and how you measuring that, communicating that progress, so everything is just clear. And being in a position where I'm sort of forced to do that, as I don't know, I imagine potentially at some of the highest levels possible of like Fortune 100 plus companies, directors of technologies, CTOs, planning the next 5 to 10 plus years of their technology infrastructure. That's probably some of the most difficult problems you could choose to, want to solve and want to plan for. It's sort of like makes a lot of other things like easy mode. Like I don't know, like what meal should I plan for the next month? Like is incredibly easier now that I'm not planning like engineering resources for the next like 2 years or something. So I think that's like been a beneficial thing. I think I don't know if there's any other like hobbies or skills that I've picked up or like joined and wanted to look at since like joining Serverless Guru. I think I've always been interested in cutting edge technology. I started in like cutting edge novel like chemical development, and now I'm here. Had experience building Alexa skills and doing like marketing and tech consulting for like clients in the financial and tech industries around how to use just like new cloud technology to benefit their customers. So I think that's always been like a common thread, and this is just like a next gen elaboration on that.
Yeah, so I think that was the most awkward way for me to ask the question, I think, that I ended up figuring out when you were talking, Josh, which is just like in a startup environment like we are, there is a lot more job aspects that have to be done, and different things that we're constantly stretching, right? And kind of pushing that bar. And so I guess to you, Jonathan, what type of things, what is it like working in this type of environment, or like a startup environment, and in this like cutting edge frontier type of industry?
Yeah, it's been really exciting, I think. I never saw myself as someone who would gravitate towards startup. I just, like I said, I'm very much tech adjacent, and I grew up being like, oh, I'm probably gonna work like in like a therapy office. Like I'm gonna do something that's like a, you know, very like you go into therapy, and like you stay a therapist for like 50 plus years. It's like a really stable uh, environment. The startup world, as people talk about a lot, is really fast paced. You have tech, like cutting edge things happening all the time. Things are like blossoming and like unfolding in front of you. And I just never saw myself as someone who necessarily would keep up with that as much. I always thought I'd get too overwhelmed by it. But I think I realize now, being here and being in this environment, that that's something that kind of excites me. I think, like, the challenge or the prospect of something really exciting and new happening. Like I'm going to just talk about being a psychologist a lot, but in that field, things happen gradually, right? Like breakthroughs in the field come after years of experimenting, and after like generations of psychologists are like, okay, well, we've been this for the past 150 years. Let's slightly switch it up, right? Like different domains will happen that way, and it's very different than like, someone being in the serverless space since 2016. It's like, oh my god, they're ancient. They've been here for so long. Like something like to that effect of like, wow, you've been developing since 2018. Wow, oh my god, you're ancient. Like, wow, like teach me your ways, like veteran. And like it's such a different type of environment, and like I think you know there's this expectation of like in the real world, like the real world, like in other businesses, like come in with 12 plus years of experience and then we'll consider you for like a like an entry level position. When it's here, it's like, well, come show up, show us that you have the skills. We'll test you, but like we got you. I mean, it's not like you can't have 12 years of experience in serverless. If someone's asking for that, I remember making a joke with Josh once. We found like a job posting that was like looking for serverless developers. You must have 10 plus years of experience developing with serverless. And it's like, well, that's not possible, really. Like maybe it is, but like not in the context that they're asking for it. You know what I mean? And I think it's a really untraditional job environment is really exciting for someone um, who didn't even know that they wanted that. I think that getting into this field really got me interested in stuff like crypto and nifties and things that I never thought I would be even remotely interested in. I remember Bitcoin came out when I was like, old enough to invest in it, but like when I was not quite interested in technology enough to like look into it. And I wish I did. And I wish that there were more, more opportunities for me to do something like that. So I think working in a startup was such a vastly different experience than I was expecting my life to go in, but one that I realized I needed because I don't think I could just sit somewhere for 50 plus years doing the same exact thing. I think I needed, I think what are we, millennial? My millennial brain won't let me. I have to like, it has to be more like TikTok, I guess, for those Gen Zers watching this right now. You got to have something kind of new and fresh with it. But yeah, I digress. That was kind of a long-winded explanation.
Yeah.
But
No. It's really cool, and I think it's gonna spur some future questions in a second. So, and then to Alex, I know, you were at a startup initially, and you went to Nike, and you're at like a huge enterprise company, one of the biggest ones, and then now you're back into a startup, and kind of what does all that look like, and where does your mind go when you think about either personally or just like the different environments for other people that are listening, like enterprise versus startup, startup versus enterprise. Where would you say that you fit? Where do you say that potentially other people would fit based on certain qualities and so on?
Yeah. The moment I joined the enterprise, I was like, yeah, this is a mistake. It's too slow. It's not recognized enough. The bean bags and the free coffees, only get you so much, right? And I say this to a lot of kind of like new engineering graduates. And I feel really lucky to have worked at a startup as my first career. And my God, I mean, that was a true startup when I tell you I was working 12 hours a day, right? Because we were a small team and, management can kind of push you that far. And, I was a new guy starting in the industry. So, I was just working hard. And the amount of stuff that you learn at a startup and the amount of different places that you see is just incomparable to working at a corporate. And when you work at a corporate environment, you really are the smallest ant out of all the people, and you really are the least impactful decision making individual, right? And even though they try to make you not feel that way, and they do a lot of different things to uh, make everyone feel empowered and have the power in the decision, but in the end, it's not really true. Organization that big cannot go to that level, right? When you have hundreds of thousands of people, it's just nearly impossible to have that kind of environment. So I'm glad that I'm working on a startup again because there's just so much to learn, and the learning aspect is something that I have the most fun doing. And I feel like my personality is like I cannot stop learning, and then once I stop learning, I'm gonna just rot as a person, as an individual. And in a way, the software industry is forcing people to do that, right? You can't You can't just stay at the same technical stack for 10, 20 plus years and expect to have a job by then, right? You have to constantly change. You have to constantly learn new technology. And that environment of startup kind of forces you to do that. And every day here, I'm learning different things, not specifically towards technical, but other side of business or even just my communication. There's a lot of other things that I'm always improving and looking upon myself that I hadn't realized that these are the key aspects that I needed as an engineer versus being an engineer in a startup. Because you can't just sit in the corner and just develop code. You have to communicate. You have to bring on ideas. You have to convince others. You have to negotiate. And a lot of these skills are, I think, really, really just valuable in terms of being a successful person in the industry, regardless of any industry, in my opinion. So I always recommend the path of a startup, and there's a lot to learn there.
Yeah, no, that's a ton of stuff that you just pointed out, which is like enterprise potentially like slow. You're like a small cog in like this big machine, or you're a small fish in a big pond. But in startups, there's a spectrum of like when we say startup, you have like really crazy 12-hour a day startup, and you have probably more like normal operating startup that's just a small company. And so I'm glad that at least at Serverless Guru, people aren't working 12 hours. Yeah, I mean, it's like, I had that same experience because I was at Nike as well. And, you have these like this very elaborate, um, you have this very elaborate like cafeteria, and you can get like this rice bowl with like sausage in it and like all this stuff in the morning, and you sit down and then you go to work, and then you come back 15 minutes later and get your first coffee, and then you could just have a whole bunch of coffee breaks throughout the entire day. And it's like, the amount of work that's like getting done is like, but it's like, I guess thinking about this, and the last thing that you mentioned there was like other skills, right? And a similar thing that I think Jonathan was kind of getting at as well is like soft skills. And so you mentioned communication, negotiation, things like this. So to kind of kick it off to Josh, what when we think about technical skill and soft skill, right? Technical skill being super well versed in the low level, let's say serverless knowledge or cloud knowledge, or specific marketing knowledge, right? But then when we come to soft skill, that human to human interaction, which one do you think, which one outweighs the other, and how critical is it to have, either one of those?
For sure. I think what it is, I think like how I've seen things play out, I think it's like the technical skills in life sort of like get you in the door, or they get you like they're the requirement. But it's like the soft skills, the multiple of how valuable your soft skills are could be, near infinite. Cause like I think there's a lot of examples I could sort of make, but in general, I think that's generally my feeling and my take on it. Cause it's like, like whether you're a software engineer, or if you're like building a ship in a shipyard, you're like a naval engineer or something like that. Like you have to know these bolts go together. Like, when my furnace breaks, I can't fix it. I definitely shouldn't be the one fixing it because I don't have the technical knowledge. But um, but the level of quality from like the people you have, like, that you're working with to either like build a house or fix a furnace or build a piece of software, there is a range of experiences, and there's a range of and there's just like a range of value that can be exchanged. And so it's like soft skills, I think, are the thing that turns something, that can turn like a one-time engagement from like that was fine, or that was whatever, or oh, that felt really weird, to wow, this was exactly what I needed at this moment. Like I think that's like all the soft skills. I've had instances where I've need something very technical and specific done, and it was just like pulling teeth because I had to work with like this one specific person or agency or a set of skills, and it's like, it feels like you're trapped. And I think like, because at the end of the day, like, we're people, we have families. For some people, work is what is it? I was talking to like someone who's in charge of a department over from like the Mars company, which owns which a conglomerate which owns like M&M's candy bar and like Benfield pet hospitals and stuff. And he had and what was it, like a phrase around like, work ends up being a large portion of our lives as human beings. So it's important that the work that we do is like meaningful and that we're able to benefit the other people that we work with in this. And so like I think I really took that to heart when I heard that. And so that's always, I think, if anything, I will always sort of steer people towards like make sure you're developing your soft skills, because I've seen that most dramatically open up opportunities for individuals. Technical skills, like you have to do it, especially if you are a software engineer and want to do that. Like you need those technical skills, but soft skills are so important.
Yeah, and I see that Alex has something on this topic. So Alex, you want to jump in?
Yeah, and I think soft skills definitely, being in the recruiting position as well, is almost more important. And I think really discipline is something that's not talked so much about in the engineering world. There's a great quote where you don't want to hire cowboys, but you want to hire farmers in the terms of engineering. Cowboys, when they see a problem, they'll get on a horse and then, let's solve it. Let's grab the gun and let's take care of it right now. Whereas farmers, you're going to look at the crop, you're going to analyze, you're going to do some documentations, and you're really thinking at a procedural level. And software development, right, is all about that, right? Having that discipline. You're not in a one-man company. You don't have a one engineer building the entire product. You work with a team full of engineers. And to do that, you have to set process, and everyone has to be disciplined in order to just kind of have a seamless, collaboration as a whole rather than just one person. And oftentimes you see a lot of highly technical people who don't have that soft skills struggle in a lot of these companies, because in the end, you're not the only person building the product. You're working with a team full of other engineers that are building the product. And if you cannot collaborate, that's a recipe for disaster in an engineering department.
Yeah, and I'm curious, Jonathan, what do you think?
Well, I had like written down this "Would you rather" question a while ago, and I think Alex just answered it. But I'd be curious about other people's opinions on it. I really like that farmer or cowboy thing. I love that example. Okay, would you rather have a veteran, highly skilled dev, right, who doesn't collaborate well, or like a new junior level dev who struggles but is highly collaborative? What would you rather have?
Yeah, you want to take it first, Josh?
Yeah, as the one in charge, as the one who would first see the situation and then communicate it to the team, I will definitely be, I'll definitely be the one to take responsibility for the answer. And what is it? I think I'm gonna fall back to like what I said. Like at a certain level, it's like the technical aptitude to a certain extent has to be there, and it also has to, because to the degree that like someone is very willing and able just to open themselves up to working really hard, the other team members who are also responsible for the outcomes and their own livelihoods have to feel comfortable accepting like the person into the team, and have to feel comfortable like on the job, and not in like a, like, I don't know, like a workplace PC sort of way, but just sort of like, is this someone that I see myself working with and I can work productively with? And like, because there definitely are situations and organizations where you can't really support the real need, like a true more junior developer or junior engineer or someone who just doesn't have a certain level of professional experience or insight. There's certain individuals where I think you can come sort of baked in, ready to adapt to that, but there does get to a point where like you need to be at a certain bar, or else other team members can be compensating too much and then it's detrimental. And so like that's something that like with like the recruiting process that we do, like we try to tease that out, like how well does this person collaborate. If they can collaborate, then they're probably going to be a success if they have the technical experience. But I think if someone just showed up, like I've never coded before, or something, like I don't have any real experience with the software development lifecycle. I've never been in like several 2-week sprints to see how like a project has unfolded and obstacles come up and then us either meet or miss the deadline. Like if they don't have that experience, I think I don't feel comfortable putting them into a project where they have to shoulder like a lot, because that's not what our clients are signing up for. But like in general, I think I'd like to say not enough skills, eager to learn, but very collaborative. Recipe for tons of success. I love it. But with like the work that we personally do, then I don't, I have to bring that to the rest of the team and see what they think. But generally, for me, it's probably a not yet.
Yeah, I think my answer is like the most political answer possible, which is it depends, right? So you put me in the right context, and it depends, right? So I love this example as well as like farmer versus cowboy idea, because I definitely skew very heavily towards the cowboy side in a lot of ways, and then background procedures and stuff. I do that too, but when it comes to like product development stuff, it's like all in, let's go. Let me just like be in my own head and work. And I've seen this play out in environments where you have to have that level of collaboration, and it kind of pulls on me because I'm like, I don't want to collaborate. I just want to do this thing because I know that I can do it. And so, but when it comes to like what I've seen with the veteran versus non-veteran, non-veteran that collaborates, veteran that doesn't. I've had personal experiences at Nike. Won't name names or anything like that, and definitely no shade or anything to this person, but I worked on a team and we had built out a product. Obviously, it was unreleased and all that stuff, but we had worked on a product. We had done that for a couple months, and then we had somebody come in who was far more experienced than pretty much all of us, and then he pretty much rewrote all the code base and used completely different structure, all these things, and it was clear that this person had so much more experience potentially than all of us, or was so just like at least showing that it was like we went home on a Friday, we came back like Monday, and it was like, all right, it's done, like everything's been like refactored towards something else. And it was just like it has this really toxic ripple effect. And the toxic ripple effect is basically it can make everybody else on the team feel bad. And it's not like exactly what Josh was saying. It's not like a PC thing. It's like a literal like, how is management going to respond to that, right? Are we actually going to move to this new thing? And it's like this, it puts in this whole like weird dynamic thing where like, somebody kind of went around the system and did something and didn't involve everyone else in the, kind of the doing of it. And then that's not great. And so in those scenarios, then yeah, the veteran could get a lot of stuff done. But when we're thinking on a more macro long-term scale, right, that's not a great thing. And so I would say that's where that depends, because if it's a short-term project, if it's a new product idea, those things I could definitely skew more heavily towards like a veteran and more of like a cowboy type, right? Because we need to get stuff done. You need somebody that can operate with like little guidance and just like go in, do stuff, get tons of things done. And we have various clients that have that type of mentality where they're looking for that. And we have other ones where we need to have that collaboration, that team cohesion, because if the team cohesion breaks, then all of a sudden people just start dropping all over the place. And so, yeah, so that's kind of my more, it depends answer on that. Let's see. I think who did not answer that one?
I think Alex, if you want to take a say at it,
stab at it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the simplest way, if I only had one choice, regardless of the situation, the way I look at it is like, you can always teach somebody who's excited and passionate about something. You can always teach juniors, but you cannot change the personality of somebody. That's something that you're born with. And being toxic can have multiple ripple effects to your entire team, and can be actually more of a red flag than somebody not capable of technical aptitude to carry on a task or something. And that's why you work in a team, right? If this guy doesn't know, does your colleague know? Does your team leader know? Does your architect know? Right? You work in a collaborative environment where that gap of technical, right? I mean, software industry is such a weird thing, because even if you're 10, 15 years senior engineer, depending on where you worked at, completely differs your expertise, right? If somebody worked on a finance backend systems and they jump into IAC serverless AppSync GraphQL, it's probably not going to be so much relevant when that person's working solely on a database, security application type of stuff. So like the expertise is really skewed in terms of what domain area you work on. So it's really hard to point like, oh, that because that person's senior, like he must kind of know everything about programming, which is, in my opinion, like not true. And we're always learning. Even if you're 10 plus 15 year senior, if you're working on a new industry or technology, you still have to learn that technology to be functional at it. So learning something new is, like I said from the beginning of this call, right? It's a constant. It's a constant, right? It's never going away. You have to learn to survive in this industry. So with that, you can always improve to be more technical, but you cannot be less toxic if you're already a toxic person. And that's a sure way to destroy your team.
Yeah. It's a very, this is one of those ones where it's like it's very nuanced, and it can get, very, very emotional and passionate about this. And I'm in line with thinking that, if you basically, if you have somebody in a team that will cause problems for other team members, that that's like almost never okay. And if we had more time, I'd get into like, how does management play a role in that, right? Because that balancing of personalities, do we hire people that have that personality and then try to work them into the team, or do we disqualify anybody that has, more of a, maybe a different type of personality? And how we filter that and how we go about that, I think that's always a very interesting topic. But we'll save that one for the next episode. Josh, I saw you raise your hand
Yeah,
here. You want to jump in?
exactly. Because I just wanted to preface, like, we're not. I don't think like the point of this was to, if it ended up coming across as like, like all cowboys are all cowboy mentality individuals are like toxic, and that, and like Serverless Guru like will not hire any cowboy like individual. Like, no, we're like an equal opportunity employer and all that. And I think just thinking about like our approach, I think is like, I think like this goes back to like authenticity and being able to be candid with individuals, especially with organizations you want to work with and people you want to work with, and sort of say that, like, out of range of like you loving to work with people versus only liking to work by yourself, like where are you, and like how has that played out in different places, and being able to be upfront about that and set expectations around like, okay, well, for this task, like you're going to need to work with people, or with this task you're not going to have to work with as many individuals, but you'll still have to communicate with clients or something. Like being able to like discuss that up front. Like, I really liked your answer to it depends, because that is sort of in truth how things play out. Like, if we know because we know the requirements, we're able to better like make that decision. And I also definitely agree with what Alex says. Like, there's so much truth to like certain individuals are more able to like be taught rather than having to unlearn things. And it's like, usually with like the time frames that like we deal with, we don't have time to like fully re-architect people's personalities. Like, that's sort of not our thing. Like, maybe we'll give him to Jonathan and he can do some social psychology, but that's not his job, so we can't do that either.
Yeah, and this is what's I kind of want to preference too. It's like, one of the amazing things that I love about Serverless Guru is that we're constantly having conversations about how to improve, and almost challenging the perspectives that we hold, and whether or not that actually fits into reality. And it's like it's it's amazing. So if you just take a snapshot of that, you could have the wrong perspective on that. But the kind of beauty in it is that we're able to kind of discuss these things, and almost through that change our opinions, and find new avenues that have been unexplored. And I love that aspect. So, but I want to segue to Jonathan here. Jonathan, what are your thoughts on all this? You're the one that posed the question. You kicked off this past 10-20 minutes. What do you think?
I love stirring the pot a little bit. I always tell people I ask the questions and I never answer them, but I think you know, I really liked Alex's answer of like, someone comes in who doesn't know as much, they can be learned and prefaced and like briefed. But if someone comes in with a nasty attitude, that's a lot harder to change, right? Like, especially if someone's like a veteran level and they're like, oh, well, you can't teach an old dog new tricks type of personality. That's hard. And it's different than like necessarily just being like a straight up like, oh, I prefer to work alone. Like that's a different energy, I think, than like, I won't collaborate. You know what I mean? Like, I don't like, I think being like, I'd rather do work by myself is a different energy than like, I just don't think that other people's opinions are as valid as mine. And I think that's kind of like the energy, I think, that like I get when people don't like collaborating. And so that's a little bit nastier to me. I think I'm not a developer at all, so I wouldn't even know the differences between veteran or junior level or someone fresh, and what goes into that, the skills, experiences in those trees. So I was really excited to hear you guys' perspectives on it. And so I don't know. I guess be a good person and collaborate, and like just do both, right? Be a highly skilled veteran who just really likes people. I guess it's like, how you please everybody. But um, I don't know. I appreciated the discourse on it, guys. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I guess I'm going to opt out
You
of
got it.
answering because I just
No,
don't
this
know.
is awesome. Which is the most? That's actually more political than depends. So I
Oh
love
yeah,
it.
right. 100%. I just can't
wise
avoid
move.
it. I'm gonna be like, well,
Okay.
here, I'll tell you something else. Also, my dog's escaping, so let's go see where she's going.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, coming to a close on all this, what do we think? Final thoughts on anything happening in the industry? Any other things? Wrap up of the show. Should we do a second episode? Should we just cap it here? How are y'all feeling?
She's right here.
Looks like a deer in the
I think this is
background. I
fun.
think
Yeah.
this is. I enjoyed this. I'll let you speak, Jonathan.
No, I like this a lot. And sorry, I'm running with my laptop right now. This feels a little weird, but here you guys get to see the woods I'm in. So while I charge up after my renegade dog, I'll let Josh.
Sure. No, just I think I enjoyed this. I'm interested to see what the audience thinks. I think this is I think it's an interesting perspective to get the sort of the thoughts and ideas of at like a high level like this of just things that are going on and how it pertains to I think larger industry trends. We also have cute dogs, so it's like this is prime for the internet, and it's just fun to get everyone's perspective. I think on these topics because they're so pertinent to like the meta aspects of the industry and also the meta performance of this of the serverless space.
Yeah, absolutely. Alex, what do you think? Should we do a second show, number 2?
I think we should. I think just kind of these open-ended discussion is definitely healthy for internally as well as just kind of hopefully these information is useful for someone out there as an audience, and hopefully maybe we can get a bottle of beer next time in the second episode, so we'll challenge ourselves more in a more sensitive topic. But no, I think this is great.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I really had fun. I'm down for that suggestion, Alex. It is a Friday. I don't mean to be out of breath. I was upstairs, and the elevation's like 4,000 feet, guys. It's pretty thin up here, so I'm not out of shape. I'm just, I'm in the mountains. No, I really like that, and I like the idea of like pushing the envelope a little bit too. Not like sensitive as in like, anything
Exactly.
too controversial, but like maybe a little bit more though. I'd really appreciate that.
Awesome. Okay. Well, yeah, we'll definitely have some. I will definitely have some alcohol. Y'all are not, inclined to do anything. But personally speaking, it's 4:30 for me. It's a lot earlier for y'all. So it's like
it's 4:30
me,
somewhere.
It's about to be 5. So
I'll bring another smoothie.
Nothing like
for me.
opening Awesome.
Ooh.
Fantastic. Cool. All right. Well, let's wrap up. Jonathan, Alex, Josh, thank you for being on the first episode of the Serverless Show. For those watching, we're not on iTunes. We're not on Google Spotify.
Yeah.
We're not on Google Podcasts. We're going to be on YouTube, and we're going to upload this, potentially some minor edits around our start. I think we had a good ballpark intro, which is solid. So let me just close this out with that. Fantastic. And we'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone. Bye.